was going to run it back, so of course we had to run it back, bro. Off rip. Mal and Rory. About a month and a half passed, and niggas is telling me that they still got the same numbers, bro. So I'm going on here, and I'm looking at the Mal and Rory podcast, and I'm looking at the Joe Budden podcast, and I'm trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. I'm trying to figure out what Joe went wrong at. I'm trying to find out, why is the Mal and Rory podcast so fucking successful? Bro, when you go to Mal and Rory numbers, bro, these niggas is doing 196,000 views in 2 days. Now, I'm no genius, nor will I pretend to be, but I've watched the Rory Mal podcast, and I must say, that shit is boring. That shit is ass. That shit is not entertaining. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, yo, maybe I'm just not smart enough to get it, because that's what they tell me in the comments. Maybe I'm a little slow. So I went and I looked at episode 7. I'm like, they got 360,000 views. I'm like, somebody got to be watching this, right? I said, something got to be going on, because this shit got to be popping if this many niggas is watching it. Especially when you go over here to the Joe Budden TV side and you see his last episode before 463, 462, 3 days ago, 122,000 views. I'm saying, yo, these niggas is crushing Joe. They beating the shit out of Joe. What can Joe do to fix this? So I went and I started adding in some factors into it. I added in the fact that Joe has a Patreon. I added the fact that Joe episodes come out a day late on YouTube compared to the Patreon, and a lot of his fans probably just watch it over there on Patreon. It's the same thing as YouTube, essentially, because there's no live chat when they premiere anyway, you feel me? And I still couldn't fathom the many people from Joe Budden's side watching the Joe Budden podcast on Patreon. I couldn't fathom it. It just didn't make sense. I'm like, why aren't all these people on here? Like, it was never those many people on Patreon. Or some people had to watch it twice. It was too many things, right? So I'm trying to figure out what the big gap difference is. So eventually, I took my talents to South Beach and I went over to Pod News, right? Now, y'all know what Pod News is. Pod News is a spot that you go to when you really just want to know what the fuck is going on. You want to see what the best podcasts are. You want to see what's going on, like, who's popping. So I went over to the Pod News and I went to the update. The update tells you the top 50 podcasts right now. So when I got to the top 50 podcasts, I'm looking for Rory and Mal to shit on Joe. I'm thinking like, yo, these niggas is about to come out. They about to go off. This shit about to get spicy. So I'm going down the list and I'm going through all these podcasts. I'm going through everybody. I'm looking. Joe Budden. I said, but that can't be right, because I didn't see Mal and Rory. But the numbers on YouTube are so great. I said, well, maybe Mal and Rory just wasn't included in this because it was so early on. And I absolutely was right. They said from quarter 3 of 2020 through quarter 2 of 2021. So that means Mal and Rory wouldn't have enough data to be on this list at all. So I said, okay, how can I prove that the Mal and Rory podcast is not doing better than the Joe Budden podcast? And I looked at all the numbers, I did all the research, and I just couldn't. I couldn't figure out any kind of excuse or any kind of fathomable answer that'll explain these guys' numbers other than they're fudging the fucking numbers. They signed to a big network. Niggas don't like Joe. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe niggas is fudging the numbers. I honestly can't see a scenario where these niggas honestly, y'all think 360,000 people are watching that episode? Within 2 weeks, you think 360,000 people are clicking on Mal and Rory? Unless Rory got all the fucking Irishmen from here to fucking Boston watching that shit, I don't see that as a possibility. I think the numbers are being fudged. I think that the Mal and Rory podcast numbers on YouTube are up about 100,000 over. I do think that they probably are doing better than Joe Budden at this point on YouTube. However, I don't think that is that big of a gap. I think about 100,000 views is just fabricated. Did Mal and Rory fabricate them? Of course not. Whoever they're signed to, they're putting money behind it. They want to make sure that this investment works out. They want to make sure that these guys succeed. So shit is getting fabricated and finessed. Simple as that. And no one can change my mind on that. But y'all let me know what y'all think, man. Y'all get at me.